Hey guys, I'm FatBuddyCat, and this is my custom vintage mini bike. Tonight, we're going to be installing the Wildcat WC22 26mm round slide carburetor. This carburetor comes from EC Carburetors, and now you can also get it from my friends at ombwarehouse.com. That's where I grabbed this 45-degree silicone tube, a short Mikuni style adapter for GX200. This would be for like a VM22. And over on Amazon, I grabbed this D-port style tube. It's basically a manifold extension for larger carburetors. However, it fits this. This also fits over this. I think you know what we're about to do. Over here on the mini bike, you can see where our intake port is right now. The issue that we're trying to solve is the angle. If I were to use a board stock style carburetor, it would sit up, kind of precarious, and towards the higher RPM range we might lose feed to our carburetor if the bowl isn't doing what it's supposed to do. So in steps our round slide carburetor. We can't really stick it back in here, and that's not really a great place for it anyway. We could try going up there, but we still have a gas tank to contend with. So what we're going to try to do is bring it out from the frame slightly and back at a little bit of an angle. Probably something like that. That way we're sitting level and we're not hitting the frame. So the reason I got this long manifold is when you stuff this all up in here, it doesn't like to come out, alright? And the more rigid tube that we have inside our silicone, I would think the least vibration we're going to have on our carburetor. We want it to be very solid. That said, we're going to also want as much of this end that's going to slide into the tube. This is where the carburetor goes, so I'm going to be cutting off this end that would naturally go to the manifold. I'll get that far, and then we'll deal with some other magic. I have a piece of tape wrapped around my 45. The reason being, this end goes in towards the head. If we leave it at that length, it's already going to come back the space of the flange, and then you got to kind of have some clearance for those nuts when they're on there. And that's going to come into why I'm using this long tube. As you pull away and you try to make the clearance for your hardware, you're also pulling off of the tube. So I wanted to use the longest manifold possible with the longest tube, right? So that we can maximize the rigidity of it. The reason I mark this is when it goes over the tube and goes back, it's going to bring that inside radius closer, right? And in reality, we want to be like almost in here on this end, right? So the carburetor can't be hanging way back here. It's going to have to be like right in this ballpark. So to ensure that it clears the frame but still fits in there where it needs to be, I'm going to rip about a 1/2 inch off it. With the tape on there, I can go right around with the razor blade. Have a nice straight cut. That was really easy doing it that way. Once I got the blade started, I could basically just run it right along that line. And boy, that cut pretty dang straight. While I'm here on the workbench, let's take a look at the tube on the manifold and the 45 on the silicone. When we come back into this, alright, that will definitely overlay us with plenty of material over the tube. It's gonna just about get into that corner. We want to keep that away for that hardware, remember? If we look at it from the top and we space it, I'd say we're a little copious. We're going to want to maximize the end of the Mikuni adapter that I cut off. So, I think my best bet is going to figure out, it's definitely going to be to figure out this end. So, if that's too much of an angle, it has to come in. I think I'm going to take about 1 inch off this end of the tube. I'll do the same thing. I'll just wrap some tape around and give the old slice-a-rooney. So in comparison, I'd say I took about twice what I took off the first one. As this is getting shorter, it's also going to be less apt to do this baloney when it's vibrating around on the motor. That's right about where it would be sitting so far. That's not good. I'm going to have to take more off of the carburetor end. I know that's not sitting on there, but it was a second ago. This is looking a whole lot more promising. At this point, I left the tape on the head side. This is the carburetor side. Now, we're going to look at the manifolds. With the Mikuni style section of the manifold, you look in there and we just barely come into the curved section inside the silicone. It doesn't feel all that bad. That's going to be clamped on. Got enough room for our nuts and bolts to go to the carburetor. Now, I look in, everything looks like it should seal up tight. I'm going to clean up the end of it before I'm finished, but we're going to have to trim this one back. I'll stick it in and see how far it goes for now. With this end, I don't want to go stuffing it in the silicone. I made that mistake the first time when I picked this thing up, just to see if it fit. Once it's in there, it doesn't like to come out. So, if I hold it next to it, I can feel where the other adapter is, right in front of that inside radius. If we stuff this all the way in, this part will hit the other adapter ever so slightly. So, in order to keep that from happening, and also to ensure a good seal by not going past this radius and forcing, the silicone to bend, out of true, if you push it in there too far, you could force it, oblong, which could effectively let air in, even though it's going to be clamped. Long of the short, I'm going to take about 3/4 of an inch off of this. I might even go for the full inch. I'm using a hacksaw and a vise. I could have cut that a little bit straighter, but in this case, it actually goes in just like this, so it's really not going to hurt anything. Now, we have to clean up our edges. On the carburetor adapter, I just smoothed out the edges. I didn't take away any material, and I didn't really bother trying to cut it flat. There's no need. The flow is going to go this way into the silicone tube. It'll pass through the silicone tube, and then it's going to pick up into this side of the manifold. I tapered that edge back so that as our flow goes that way, it doesn't pick up any turbulence off the edge of this tube. The first part going on is going to be the gasket and this adapter. Next, I'm going to add a hose clamp and then the silicone tube. After the tube's on, I added one more clamp and then my carburetor manifold. At this point, we can mate the carburetor up and see where we are. That's a little bit far back. If we look up here, we still have a good amount of clearance between the carburetor and the frame. So if I go back about another 1/2 inch that way, it's not going to hurt anything. Now that I have this manifold right where I want it, I can go ahead and tighten my two clamps. This thing is rugged. The transitions on the inside are all going the right direction. It's really smooth going into the second manifold. Coming off of this manifold into the silicone tube on this inside radius, it could use a little bit of work just on this side. But let's see if this thing runs before we make any adjustments. The next step to making it run is attaching the carburetor to that sweet new manifold. The cool part about this is once you have it figured out which direction your manifold is going to go, you can pull it back out of the silicone tube, tighten everything on, so you just have one piece, slide it back in, and then just tighten the clamp. Alright, our carburetor is on there, and it's not going to just fall off, believe it or not. This is on there very, very well. The next thing is going to be that gas tank. It's going to go up there. Hopefully, you'll be able to feed this carburetor. It's going to be close. I'm going to see if I have some nylock nuts that'll fit on those threads. And I'm also going to cut off this old fuel line and replace it with some new Tygon. Oh, that looks pretty cool. Too bad we can't use it. Well, I guess we could, but here's the issue. The petcock is right over the cylinder. I'm not as worried about the gravity feed on this because, well, I don't think this bike is going to be ridden, that long at a time where you couldn't top it off with fuel and it continues to do its thing. My concern is heat dissipation and heat in general this close to the cylinder. If we attach our fuel line, it's going to want to come down and then make a turn. It's going to get even closer. So besides building some kind of a shield that could go up in here maybe, I think I got another idea. I hope I can find another tank because that looks cool, man. Darn. Step one to my next big idea. I took a piece of rubber heater hose and I cut it to a desired length, split it down the middle. I then used a series of zip ties to attach the piece of heater hose to the frame where my gas tank is going to go. Are you guys ready for the definition of opulence? I don't think you can handle it. Wham bam blah jam. We got the OMB dual tank special. I'm not going to be running out anytime soon. Now, I just have to figure out how I'm going to plumb these together. I think what I would like to do is run them both into a Y and then to a filter, my petcock, and then I'll bring my line back to my carburetor. My hope here is that with the gravity from 2 tanks and 2 lines going into one, that we will build better pressure than using 1 single tank alone. Otherwise, I would put 2 individual petcocks with 1 filter further down the line. That way, 1 works as a reserve. In this situation, where our carburetor is up a little bit higher, I think we're going to benefit from the 2 into 1. Alright, I have this thing all plumbed in. I tried to do a nice job. Filter right here. Obviously I tried to make it match. No, just kidding, that's what they had, but heck of a coincidence. I tried to keep these as short as I could without causing any, impingement on the line. My only concern with this setup would be if 1 tank went dry before the other, that maybe that could cause air to go in 1 line and not the other line. But the way gravity works and mechanical feed, this should be okay. Next, I'm going to take a look at this throttle cable as well as a kill switch. I'm going to move my kill switch over to the left side, and I believe this throttle cable here is already set up for, oh yeah, that's a thumb throttler. See what I got, guys. In that case, I'll be losing this whole throttle assembly and running some 7/8 grips. I have some nice dirty yellow ones. I'll match that Tygon line. Sort of. First thing I did was the thumb throttle. I'm all set up on my brake handle, my kill switch. I'm running the stock Trailmaster wiring harness that originally went with this block and the coil that's on this motor. I'll just tape some things up and make it look a little cleaner. That's just our come up. I have my wires zip tied together, not taped, and left this one connector so that it can come apart. And I tape this end. That way this is protected, it's not moving, everything's good up here, nothing's pinched on the ends, and we could clip these zip ties if we want to remove the motor and not the kill switch, or the kill switch and not the motor or the coil or the wires and everything else. So neat little trick. I don't even know if it's a trick, it just kind of worked out. I'll take this and stuff it up here and run a zip tie around or something. There you go. The only time you see that weird loop on the end as if the bars are turned as far as they'll go, which they're probably not going to get turned that far that often. Cool. To make this brake cable work, all I did was routed it down alongside my tanks and came back with a sweep and right down to the brake. Over on the carburetor side, in order to keep this throttle cable in and at the angle that it's going to need to be so that it doesn't pull up like that and cause the throttle to stick, what I'll end up doing is drilling a hole in here somewhere, and I'll just use one of those throttle cable holds that come from a stock linkage. Let me see if I can find one. I was able to harvest one off a stock Predator 212 I had sitting around, and here is what we have. I drilled 2 holes, one for the screw, and probably not going to get you back under there, but there's a nylock nut on the back side of the chassis, and then I drilled a second hole so that the nub could go in, and left, the ends of the tab like that so that it doesn't completely squish the cable, but holds it right where it needs to be. At this time, I also found the proper spacers and shims in order to set my Torquezilla on in line with my pulley. We're going to leave the belt off for now, but I'll finish my output shaft bolt. Alright, at this point, we have all of our controls. Everything is routed, and basically I'm just going to put some gas in these tanks, pull the choke, turn the gas on, and we should be able to start it. The belt is off, and I still have to do the header wrap. We got something else we got to do too. I have fresh gas in both of my tanks. I'm just going to go ahead and put my caps on. We'll be ready to start this thing. Alright, I turned the fuel on, waited a minute. We have gas in the line. We're live, guys. Alright, let's fire this thing up. The choke on. adjustment. I have it worked to a high idle right now. Bringing the idle down. It's running on its own right now. Letting it warm up. Sometimes that can affect your carburetor seal, especially where it meets the head. It's really, really cold out. Even in this garage, you can see my breath right now. Not too bad right here. About it, guys. Yeah, buddy. The next thing I'd like to tackle is these foot pegs. I have these really sweet vintage covers that I get from OMB Warehouse. I've used them before on my custom Doodlebug, and we're going to do it again. But before I figure out exactly where my feet are going to go, I got to figure out where the rest of me is going to go. Fortunately, we're going to have some help with that, because my friends from Sam's Garage sent me some really nice seat material and a mysterious gift in a really big box. Well, it might not quite be Christmas, but it's definitely a work in progress. Have a good night, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.